should be played at high volume. This should be played at high volume. This should be played at high volume. Preferably in a residential area.
The following thoughts on Happy Hour do not represent Cox Media Group or its sponsoring. Anything you hear may and will be used against you. Thank you. Voted as best local podcast in Tampa Bay by the Creative Loafing. You're listening to Happy Hour.
What up? What's happening? This is Happy Hour. I am your host, Ryan Hoppe. And this next guest is a guy you can see all this weekend at the Tampa Improv. On the phone line, he has been seen on such shows as Last Comic on NBC, and he was a finalist on America's Got Talent. On the phone line is the very funny comedian known as Tom Cotter. What's up, dude?
Hey, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
How has everything been, man? You seem like a guy that grinds through comedy and always gets it done. You seem like a guy that's always working. Am I right about that?
You got to be. I got 3 tuitions on the horizon. I have 3 boys that I know of, and I got to pay for a college tuition eventually, and I got to have a retirement plan other than scratch tickets and a metal detector. So, you got to work while you can.
So, how has everything been going with your comedy?
I got, can I use adult language?
Yeah, this is a podcast. You can say whatever the fuck you want.
Excellent. I stepped in leprechaun shit because the summer I went on AGT was the first summer Howard Stern, and it was, that shows up against reruns because it's on during the summer. So the ratings were through the roof. And as comedians, we all do Leno and we all do Letterman and the late night Conan stuff, but that's a fraction of the audience you get when you do primetime network television. And that's why Last Comic Standing and America's Got Talent are just such unbelievable tools for comedians to get out in the public eye. So I was really lucky. No comic had ever reached the finals until my year, and I credit Howard Stern with that. And so I went all the way to runner-up and lost to a dog act, which is devastating. But right up until then, it was the best ride ever.
Did you ever think of it this way, though, that people will know you more because you lost to the dog rather than being the winner, or were you pretty heartbroken over it?
I like your former take on it because that is the glass half full, but I will never get over the fact that I lost to non-humans, to creatures that had no idea they're even in a competition. Those are the people, those are the act that beat me. So I wanted $1 million. It's a game show. It's technically a game show.
That's true.
It's a winner-take-all game show. So the dogs got the whole $1 million, and the rest of us got nothing.
But was there some advice that guys that have been so big in this business, like Howie Mandel and Howard, was there advice that they gave you off the camera once the show was over with?
Not really. They were just really, really nice to me. I don't know what I did, but they could not have been nicer on camera and off camera. If you watch every episode from my season, all 3 judges, the other judge was Sharon Osbourne, just were really, really nice to like 3 of us. The sand artist, the earth harp guy, and myself were they just very supportive the whole time. And then when the show ended was the first time we could talk to them. They don't allow us to talk to them before the show ended because they didn't want any impropriety. So after the show was over, they could not have been cooler to me. Howard had me do a couple of things for him and his wife and their charity, and Sharon was really sweet. Although she wanted the dogs, she clearly wanted the dogs to win. She was very supportive and nice to me afterwards. And Howie was great from the get-go, and he's a comic, so I kind of expected that.
What's it like, though? You obviously aren't scared of being in front of people. You do live shows. But how different is it when you're on the biggest show in the summer on a major TV network like NBC? How surreal and nerve-wracking is it to be on America's Got Talent?
It's, I lost 15 pounds that summer. I had acne and diarrhea. I mean, it wreaked havoc on my body. It was very intense. When I do a show like tonight, I'm at the Tampa Improv, and they're really nice people, and it'll be a full room, but there'll be people that I don't know. I'm not emotionally invested in them. When I did this, not only was it 40 million eyeballs on me, it was eyeballs that I give a shit about. It was my dad, and it was my wife, and my children, and my brothers and sisters. So I really didn't want to drop the ball. And so, that was very nerve-wracking, and I almost had to wear Depend undergarments out on that stage. It was that much of a shit-your-pants situation.
How does the process go to try out for the show? Because, when you would watch American Idol, they would show people waiting in line. Did you have sort of an edge because people knew who you were from being on TV? How does this go? Break it down for us.
Ryan, I've been at this a long time. I've been at this for a quarter of a century, more than that now. And so every year, managers, agents, club owners, everybody would say to me, Tom, you're perfect for the show. It's perfect for you because I'm a rapid-fire one-liner guy, and you only get 90 seconds to perform on that show. So every year they'd say do it, and every year I wouldn't do it because Pierce Morgan was he hated American comics, and so I wasn't going to go on national television and have him bone me in the ass in front of 40 million people. So I decided never to go on the show until Howard Stern replaced him. Then I had 3 judges that were good. It was Howie Mandel, Howard Stern, and Sharon Osbourne. And even then I balked. But then the Friars Club called me, and they said that the maitre d' from the Friars Club called and said he had overheard the producers who were having lunch at the Friars Club say that they were really happy with their magicians, singers, jugglers, but they weren't happy with this season's crop of comics. So I said, what the hell, I'll try. And so he actually got me the audition that day, and it was a long ordeal, but I didn't have to wait in lines that long. If I had to do it overnight or something, then that would have been a deal breaker, and I wouldn't have done it. But it took the bulk of the day to go in because you get your call back that day. If you get past the first producer, then you go up in front of the NBC executives and the show producers, and then they keep you in the dark until they finally call you and say, in 1 week we want you to perform in front of the celebrity judges, and then you're off to the races.
Now, you obviously had to change your act because you had 90 seconds to do comedy and you're on NBC, so you have to be sort of clean for prime time. What was the key to making it work where you knew how to be edgy but clean and get it done in 90 seconds? How did you do it?
Ryan, they told me to be edgy because it was the first year of Howard Stern, and they said, look, because I think they thought I was the squeaky clean cruise ship comic because I had been working ships for a while, so they were afraid that I wasn't going to be edgy enough, and they didn't really do their research and go back and look at some of my old videos, which are kind of edgy. So they said to me, be edgy, and if we have to pull you back, we will. And through the entire season, they only, the censors only kiboshed maybe 2 or 3 of my jokes. The rest of them got by because they're innuendo, they're double entendre, so you could kind of get around it. I wasn't bashing everyone over the head with like anal fisting or anything.
Yeah.
So they let me get away with most of the stuff I tried, and we didn't have an issue. The one joke that they had a big problem with was, it's just a one-liner about I say I'm on an airplane, and I said I was on this airplane and I was dressed to kill. I had a turban, a beard, exploding sandals, and they didn't want that because of, at the time it was New York, it was 9/11 and all that stuff, so they asked me to be sensitive to that and not offend the Muslims, so I said, okay, I won't do that joke.
Now, when you got reprimanded for that, do they just pull you aside? Do you go in someone's office, or was it not that big of a deal?
No, you have to submit the act written out to them.
Yeah.
And they sent it back to me and said, with a line through that saying, they actually tried to rewrite the joke, Ryan. It was ridiculous. They said, can you say you were dressed like a genie? And I'm like, no, I can't say that. And then they said, can you say that you had a turban like a New York cab driver? And I'm like, no, you're butchering the fucking joke, So I said, I'd rather not do it than have you guys try to rewrite it in a non-funny way. So I just bailed on the joke, and it wasn't a big deal.
How awesome was it when you got to roast everybody and the one and only legend known as Joan Rivers comes out? Because that was some great TV. How awesome was that for you, dude?
I fucked a leprechaun. Lisa Lampanelli was supposed to do it with me. They had never had a comedian in the finals, so they didn't know what to do for the duets. The final episode, they have the duets where it's usually singers, and they sing with their idol, and it's wonderful. And a magician gets to work with a great magician. So they didn't know what to do with me, so they thought Lisa Lampanelli and I could roast the judges. But then Lisa apparently had pissed off some NBC executive when she was on Donald Trump's show, The Apprentice, and so at the last second they pulled her from the show. And so now it's the day before the final episode, and it's going to be live. And like a white knight, they call Joan Rivers, and she says, I'm off that night. I'm in New York. I'll come do it. And she could not have been nicer. Honest to God, Ryan, she called me and said, look, this is about you. I want you to shine. I'm just there to support you. and she could not have been cooler to the. And in rehearsal, there was a scene. If you watch the video clip, she pushes me, and in rehearsal, she said, "I want you to push me back." And I said, "Joan, you're 80 years old. I can't push an old woman on national television in front of 40 million people." And she says, "Just do it. It'll be funny. I won't fall. Just give me a little nudge." And during the episode, I didn't push her, and she got pissed at me for not pushing her. And afterwards, she said she called me a chicken shit. She said, "You're a chicken shit. You should have pushed me. It would have gotten a great laugh." But the segment was great, and she died a year later, and I will forever hold on to that memory as one of the greatest moments of my comedy career.
Did you get to talk to her after the show? Like, I know she told you to do some things, but did you get to talk to her about her life and comedy and being a legend?
No, before that, when we had these long rehearsals, there was downtime when her writers, she had a bunch of writers, and they would look over my stuff and make sure that we weren't doing jokes that were too similar and everything. And so we would be standing there, and that's the only time we really had idle chit-chat. And I just told her what a big fan I was of her and how much I enjoyed her. And she said nice things, and she said, my guys made me research you a little bit, and she watched some video clips, and she was really nice. And plus, we had some friends. I had a friend, Brad Zimmerman, that used to be her permanent opening act, and so we talked about him a lot. We just did, shot the shit, and she could not have been nicer, and she gave me her own book, and she signed it to me, and it was really couldn't have been sweeter. As on TV, she's this abrasive personality, but she was really the sweet old woman to me, and then let me live that incredible dream. So forever indebted to her.
Now, I've heard good things about the old show, Last Comic on NBC, and I've heard bad things. What was your time like on it? Because I know there's often been controversy over that show. So what was it like for you?
Well, let me preempt my statement by saying that the show was great for my wife and I. We were the only married couple on the show, and some producers saw us on the show and gave us our own reality show on the Women's Entertainment Network. So we, and that paid my twins and everything, and that was great, so that we really benefited from the show. Now, having said that, that's the positive. The bad side of it is they called it Last Client Standing the season I was on. It was such a farce. They should just say we're casting a show, but instead they do this smoke and mirrors thing where they try to portray to the American public that they're putting the best comics in the house, when in fact I was at the Vegas round supporting my wife, who went further than I did on the show, and don't think I don't hear about that every time we have an argument. But I was there to support her at the Vegas round, and two comics, Monty Hoffman and who's the other guy? Natterman, Dan Natterman, both got standing ovations, and they didn't make it into the house. And two people who got booed off the stage that night made it into the house. So, the judges that night were Drew Carey, Anthony Clark, and Brett Butler, and they stood up and stormed out because the producers didn't tell them that they were just eye candy, that their judging mattered none at all. The executives were going to make all the decisions. So it really was a farce, and it was on the cover of Entertainment Weekly that month, and it said, when is reality not reality? So they're casting a show, and plus it's pre-recorded. AGT is live. The first couple episodes are pre-recorded, but then they go live, and you can't fuck with live. Live is live, but you can fuck with pre-recorded, and they would edit it any way they wanted to make good comics look bad and bad comics look good. And so there are some great comics that did very well on that show, and God bless them, and I'm happy for them. But some great comics didn't even make it past the first round. Will Durst is just an incredible political comic, didn't even make it past the first round. Yet guys that opened for him made it all the way to the finals. And the same with Pablo Francisco. You can't tell me Pablo Francisco isn't a top-shelf comic. Didn't even make it past the open auditions. So that show is complete bullshit, always has been, and I'm bitter and jaded about it to this very day, because they inserted the sound of crickets behind two of my friends when they auditioned. Clearly there were no crickets in the goddamn comedy club, but they decided to humiliate these comics and put crickets behind them after a joke bombed. And I'm like, you fucking douchebag. So I hate that show with every fiber of my being.
Now, I heard you talking about this too when you were on the Mike Calta show, that they didn't really spread the wealth right, because that was back in 2004 during the last season of Friends, and everyone was making so much money, and then all the comics aren't making that much. How annoyed and how jaded were you at that factor?
That's the thing. I understand NBC and CBS and Fox and ABC want to make money, and I understand it's a profit-making thing. But the reason comics hate the reality television boom was because it kind of killed the sitcom. There were so many more sitcoms 15, 20 years ago, but now it's all reality TV on all the networks. And so, we hated reality TV for that reason. And so all of a sudden now, you're at a point where you can't beat them. You got to join them. So I rode the reality television wave to where I am now. So I sound like a hypocrite, but I had to do it because I wasn't getting on sitcoms, and so I decided to do AGT and Last Comic Standing. But if you're NBC, that season, for our season on Last Comic Standing, our ratings were almost as good as the final episode of Friends. Yeah, and it's shocking to say that, but it really was. That was when the show was in its heyday. So it was really kicking ass. Last Comic Standing, Jay Moore was the host. It was, really well funded and produced, and it was prime time. And so it was on NBC along with the other shows. But the grand prize for our show that season was a $50,000 development deal with NBC. And just a development deal didn't mean you got anything more than a $50,000 development deal. And after your agent takes his cut and your manager takes his cut, now, you're looking at a $35,000 probably. Whereas on Friends that year, every single cast member, and they earned it, but every single cast member was making $1 million. So you had $6 million per episode just for the talent on that, whereas all you're paying on Last Comic Standing is $50,000 at the end of the year and a few per diems and some hotels to put people up. That's it. So it cost dramatically less to produce Last Comic Standing that season than it did some of their sitcoms, and that's why NBC said, fuck it, we're going to do less sitcoms, we're going to do more of this reality TV because the profit margin is so much bigger.
Would you say that NBC, Fox, CBS, they're all kind of going down the drain when it comes to sitcoms? Because it seems like each and every year, the shows that do good are the really easy and cliche ones. And the ones that are edgy, like Rob Lowe's one, The Grinder, get canceled. Would you say that the art of the sitcom is dying and things are going to like Netflix and FX?
Yeah, clearly there is a movement towards, and it's the generation that now is doing everything on their cell phone and their iPad, of course, that everybody's doing Vivo and whatever other source they want. So the networks are scrambling, and I understand they're in a weird position right now. But how fucked up are they? Remember, 15 years ago, Ellen comes out on television in her sitcom, and ABC cancels her, and all the Christian groups come up, and they're boycotting the show. Every single goddamn sitcom now has a gay person on it. At least one. Every single one of them.
Oh, yeah.
We watch Modern Family. We think it's hysterical. Cameron's the gay guy. My kids now watch this new one, The Real Orions or whatever the hell it is, and it's got a kid who came out of the closet. And the same thing for the McCarthys that was canceled recently. That had a gay. Everybody has a gay character in their thing now. Well, it was only 15 years ago that was so taboo. So, yeah, the sitcom is constantly evolving, and if you think back, Archie Bunker said some shit on his sitcom that he could never get away with now. So it's just weird how the networks respond to the public, and I will blame it on the public. The public seems to have their head up their ass about what's acceptable and what's funny and what's not. And if you can figure it out, you're a better man than I, because I can't.
What is your take on that? It seems like when people get offended by things, it ruins everything for comics, radio hosts, people in theater, music. To me, this new thing of fake outrage is ruining everything, Tom, and it's just making things bland. You know what I mean?
It's a great title for it, fake outrage, which is exactly what it is. It's so contrived. Just today, the Baltimore prosecutor who prosecuted those cops in the Gray incident, she's being sued by the cops now, and they're black cops suing a black prosecutor because she wanted a grandstand and make a big deal out of it. And it turns out that the grand juries are saying that the cops didn't do anything wrong, and this is just a big thing to appease people. It's ridiculous. And Seinfeld said most recently, and I'm sure you heard about this, he won't do colleges anymore.
Yeah,
he's got $500 million of cash, and he goes home and sleeps on a mountain of cash every night, and he can do whatever the fuck he wants. He's not doing colleges anymore because he goes to these colleges and people get offended, and then they tweet about him or Facebook about. And if Seinfeld is offending you, what the fuck chance do I have? He's squeaky clean, and I'm a little edgier. So you do these gigs now, and you're walking on eggshells.
Yeah.
The whole time you're thinking, oh shit! If I do a corporate gig, someone's afraid of being fired. Who hired me? If I do a college gig, the little lesbian's going to show up and stand in the back of the room taking notes, and she's just waiting to be offended. So you can't open your mouth now without people saying, oh, you offended me, you hurt my feelings, now I'm going to throw you under the bus on social media. So it's really hard for us now as comics to do that. Every single show, someone will say something, or every time you post something on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, some douchebag chimes in and says, you hurt my feelings. Well, fucking don't follow me then. Grow a dick and follow someone squeaky clean that's not going to offend you. But don't, shit on me if I'm posting something that you don't enjoy. It's like, oh, God, it's so frustrating.
What I don't get too, Tom, is they want people to say they're sorry. Like a few months ago, Rosie made a joke about kids with autism, and everybody was up in arms, and she said she was sorry. What I don't get, Tom, is she's not sorry. She's just being forced by her agent and the public to say she's sorry. I just don't get why they want you guys to say they're sorry if it's not genuine and real. The whole thing is so fucking nauseating. It's ruining the outlet that is creativity. It's sickening, Tom. It's absolutely sickening.
I'm glad you see it from your point of view, because I've been living it, and it's really frustrating for us. I can't tell you how many insincere apologies I've had to write and verbally say to people over the years, because people get outraged by something I said. And I'm not an outrageous comic. I'm not. I really love Nick DiPaolo and Dave Attell. They're two of my very favorite comics, but they're going to ruffle feathers a shitload more than I am. So if I'm writing these apologies, I imagine that's a daily event for them. And so I just wish people would let us have our freedom of speech. And if you don't want to be offended and you're coming to a comedy show, then you might want to rethink get your money back. If you're going to come there wanting to be offended, then you're going to be offended. I guarantee it.
How do you deal with people that heckle at your shows? When I saw Nick 2 years ago, he had these bridesmaids leave, and he called them a bunch of see you next Tuesdays and bitches and whores, and it was the funniest thing I ever saw, but I thought about it. Most comics don't do that. So how do you approach people that heckle at your show?
I'm pretty lucky, and it's my style. My style is very rapid fire, kind of one liner leads into the next liner. So I just don't I don't have these pregnant pauses in my act. I'm fucking ADD, so I'm banging out these one liners with very little space for someone to yell out a heckle. So I really don't get heckled that often. I know these comics who are storytellers take 5 minutes to go over to the stool and pick up their drink and take a sip, and they have these pregnant pauses in their act that they seem to tolerate. I can't stand it. I think you're supposed to be being funny constantly, and so my act doesn't lend itself to getting heckled. Now, of course, I've been at this a quarter century. I have been heckled by like black belt hecklers, but if you're going to let a heckler win, then you're in the wrong line of business. You have the spotlight on you. The people paid to see you. You're on a stage. You have amplified voice because you have a microphone. So if you can't win with the deck stacked in your favor that bad, then you're in the wrong line of business. My years of doing this, you stockpile all these great comebacks, and you have them in your brain, and they're just locked and loaded, and you're ready to spew them if you have to. And I've gone so far as, and I'm not proud of this, but I have a rap that I do when it gets really bad. If there's a drunk heckler that just won't stop and there's no crowd control in the room, no security, then I pull out the rap, and the rap has never failed me. It's because they can't get a word in, and it's just a series of lines just shitting on the person, and because it's a rap, at the end people go berserk, and I rarely have to pull it out, but if I do, it's usually it's a game over kind of situation.
Now, for people that haven't seen your comedy, is it observational? Is it about your life? What would people see if they were to come see you this weekend at the Tampa Improv?
Well, my kind of claim to fame is that I cram 2 hours of material into an hour. So I just bang out. It's a Boston style. It's a style that I learned in Boston. It's kind of rapid fire misdirection, and people who are famous for it go back to vaudeville, but most recently, Wendy Liebman is really good at it. Don Gavin is the king of it. Brian Kiley, and it's just misdirection in the sense that it's a setup. Most comics do a setup, and then they do a punchline. I tag a joke to death, so I'll do setup, punchline, tagline, 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 tagline. I'll tag a joke to death, and so each tagline is a double entendre or an innuendo or something. It's a left turn in some way. It's a curveball. So you really have to pay attention to my show. So second shows on Friday nights when people have been working all week and they went right to happy hour and they're in a little bit of a coma and their synapses aren't firing. Those are tough shows for me. But 8 o'clock shows early in the evening when people are kind of ready and they're willing to go along for the ride, those are my best shows.
Now, what are some of the best towns and major cities that embrace your comedy the most? And what are some towns and cities that just don't get it?
Well, I started in Boston, so Boston, it's a Boston style, so that's where I feel probably most at home. But I've been in New York City for 20 years now, and they're kind of, any area that's on the coast. East Coast or West Coast or even Chicago, Atlanta, people were kind of they're kind of hip and they're just not dumber than a bucket of hammers. And you get that in some places in the middle of the country, not all places, and I'm not shitting on the heartland, but and Florida, when I come down to Florida during the season, when I come down here from October until May to do these gated communities on the East Coast, in Boca and everything, those are really intelligent people. They're doctors and lawyers and everything, but they're old. And so they just don't, they're not as quick. And so my style of comedy, I really have to slow it down for them. And I'm not saying I dumb it down, but I slow it down. And my dad's a retired neurosurgeon, and I have to slow it down for him because he's 90. So it's more of an age thing than an education thing. But, I do a lot of, again, innuendo that could be a little offensive to some people. So when you're in the Bible Belt, you kind of have to watch what you're saying, too. So I might edit a little bit there, too. I'm not out to offend people. I want to entertain people. But I don't like walking on eggshells, and I don't like having to guard whatever I say. But it's kind of par for the course now.
Now, where do you want to see yourself in 5 years? Would you want to have your own sitcom on HBO or FX, or would you want to keep on touring in comedy?
I'm always going to tour. I belong to the Friars Club in New York City where the average age is deceased, and you see these old comics there. Henny Youngman was there right up until he died, and, George Burns and these guys who literally perform until they're 100, not because they have to. They're rich beyond belief, but they love doing it, and I love doing it, and I'm always going to want to do it. Now, getting on a sitcom helps you get exposure, much like AGT did for me, and it puts asses in seats at theaters and comedy clubs. So it's kind of a means to an end. There are guys who just do comedy to get on a sitcom, and just abandon comedy after they get on a sitcom. But I think one kind of begets the other. Ray Romano still tours when he was doing his show, and now he's on vinyl on HBO, and he's still telling jokes. So I think these guys don't need the money; they just love doing it. I will always tour, and every time I can get on camera, I'm a whore.
And now, where can people find your work online, and where can they see you this weekend in Tampa Bay?
Well, I'm at the Improv in Tampa in Ybor, and it's really a cool area. I'm really digging it here. I'm having a blast.
It's a lot of fun.
It's great. And so I'm here for 2 shows Saturday night, 1 show Sunday night. We had 2 on Friday last night, and they were great crowds. The second show, oddly enough, was bigger than the first show, so it was we had people up in the balcony, and it was pretty crowded, and it was fun. Tonight I'm expecting kind of nice crowds as well. And then Sundays there's just the 1 show, and then I'm out of here. But my stuff is all over YouTube. It's on my website, tomcotter.com. Cotter with a C, and they can follow me, and I wish they would on Instagram and Twitter at Tom Cotter Comic, and I'm on Facebook, and I'm as much of a social media whore as I can be.
Well, Tom, keep up the good work. I love how you approach comedy and how you're very witty and quick, because I have ADHD, so I love how you get the jokes out real quick. So keep up the good work. I hope people see you tonight and tomorrow in Tampa Bay, and it's been a lot of fun having you on Happy Hour, my man.
Hey, the pleasure was mine, and I really appreciate you having me on, Ryan.
Sounds good. Keep up the good work, Tom.
Thanks, buddy.
And that was Tom Cotter. You can see him all this weekend at the Tampa Bay Improv. This has been Happy Hour. I am your host, Ryan Hoppe, saying peace out.
Happy Hour. Happy Hour.